One of the ways that I am going to walk you guys through using the sentiment die is going to be through Google Docs. I'm choosing intentionally to use Google Docs because I think it's going to be the most accessible for people. But keep in mind, if you were comfortable with things like Word, WordPad, whatever the word processing program that comes with like Apple computers, that kind of thing, use what you're comfortable with. Most of the edits that I'm doing, you're gonna have the same options. It just might be in a different place, or maybe different amount of steps to get there. So for me, if it matters, I don't think it does. I use Chrome. I go to Google. Up here, I learned to call this thing the waffle. It's actually the Google Apps. The teachers were calling it waffle during distance learning. So I click up here. Google Docs for me shows up kind of in this second section of apps that they've got on here. So I click Docs, and then I come over here and I just hit blank. I just want a blank document. Now, you could go ahead and follow along once and just save the file as a template that you can kind of keep typing your journaling over. So you just go and find that file, open it, and you don't have to mess with the margins. You don't have to mess with the width and height of your typing area. You don't really have to mess with any of that. Even if you use the same, like, let's say you have like a font that you only do your journaling in, then you could just leave the font there, leave the font size that way, and just kind of have it be like a shortcut. I'm going to show you the steps to kind of set that up. And again, if you're using something else, you should still be able to follow along. So one of the first things I do is I go up here to File. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom and hit Page Setup. I want to go ahead and switch this to landscape, and then I am going to change my margins to 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to change these to 0.5. This was a little quicker in Microsoft Word for sure. There's an option for margins, and I always used to just click narrow. Anytime I was doing journaling strips and printing stuff out, it just takes away less waste. And then by switching it over to landscape, I'm going to, in theory, be able to have, like if you were trying to type up a bunch of journaling for a bunch of layouts, you could type up a bunch of it, cut the paper in half, and then you would have 2 pieces to run through that die, and you're going to get a total of 44 journaling strips. So after I change the margins and change it to landscape orientation, I am going to come up to Format, Columns, and I'm going to change it to 2. This is just something that I've done for years. To me, I like to visualize the fact that I'm going to have, the die is going to be over here on the left, and then it's also going to be over here on the right, because I'm basically going to cut my paper in half, kind of where the 5-inch mark is on here. Now, I do come up here, and I'm hoping you guys can, I don't know how to zoom in on my screen recording. It's set up for 2 columns, and it kind of, I think the software will sort of take in how much you have a margin, and they think that you want the same amount here in the middle. What I like to do is I like to get the edge of that gray area, click and drag. So right now it's set for 4 3/4 inches wide. The die itself is 4 1/4. So I just like to pull it over and go to 4 1/4. Now, if you like a little bit more like wiggle room or a little bit more like blank space where your words start and end, then I would say scoot it over here to 4. The other thing is, while the die cuts 4 1/4 inches, your journaling doesn't have to be 4 1/4 inches. One of the layouts that I had used with them, the space that I had was 3 inches wide. So what I did was, again, I just grabbed it, I pulled it over to 3 inches. I'm going to use my trimmer to cut off the ends where there's no text after I've printed. But I only want my text to go 3 inches wide, and I'm not going to be able to rely on myself to kind of keep checking this ruler. So I just give myself only the amount of space that I want my journaling to go, if that makes sense. For the sake of the video, I'm just going to keep it at 4 1/4 because that's the width of our die. Now, it's a little bit easier to do the math over here on this side. This one, I just kind of count and make sure. Typically, it will kind of mirror it. So like you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 inches and then a 1/4 inch. So both of these are going to be the same. Now, the first time I used it, Google Docs is already set for Arial font size 11. This was perfect for me. I actually typed up my journaling and did like a test run, and it fit perfectly. Now, I didn't do a full 22 rows of journaling. I think I had like 6 or 7, but they were all pretty centered and it worked great. Now, the nice thing about the die, so like we're just going to keep typing, is that you can type up journaling for many layouts worth of information that you're trying to go without like needing to, how do I word this, like skip space. So like let's say this was the journaling for one layout. I'm just going to come down and I'm going to, continue to type, and I could, basically just kind of keep going. And let's say this is journaling for another layout. The way I used to do it was I would type a couple lines and then I would have like space above it so that when I was trimming them with my trimmer, I kind of knew that the journaling, it was like a break. Because this is a die and it's going to be cutting the strips separately, I don't find myself needing to do that. You do just kind of need to pay attention to what the words actually say. And when you have a pile of strips, it's kind of like putting a puzzle back together. So I'm still kind of playing around with the different fonts and font sizing and stuff like that. So I have already probably in the process of playing around with editing this video and stuff. I'm going to continue as I'm finding things. I'm going to add them to this doc, and then I'm going to put a link to the doc in the description for the video. And it's going to kind of serve two purposes. One, it's going to kind of be a cheat sheet for fonts and the sizing of that font for what works for this die, but it's also going to kind of be a look into some of my favorite fonts because a lot of people ask me that. I tend to mix up probably between like 8 and 10 different fonts depending on my mood and what my photos are. And I get asked that a lot, so I kind of felt like if I can put it in a document, you guys can access it whenever. That may be helpful. Now, I don't want to just say that any font at a font size 11 is going to work, because some of the more like intricate fonts, like something like this is like a handwriting one. I don't think I downloaded this one. This one is naturally a little bit smaller than something like Arial and Century Gothic, but I don't know how much spacing is actually formatted into the font itself. And sometimes things like this one, an 11 in Pacifico could actually be a little bit taller than an 11 in Arial, I've kind of noticed. It used to be, 11 was this exact height and 12 was this exact height. I've kind of noticed a little difference in like script fonts and different fonts that you download from different websites. So I don't want to like say black and white 100% 11 will work or 12 will work. I think 11 is a good starting point because for me, Arial and I think Century Gothic, the line spacing that's built into those fonts worked with the die. If you are, I would say if you're not tech savvy, then the document to refer to things like the font and the size is going to work for you. If you use word processing things a lot, then I think you're going to be able to kind of play around with different, I'm trying to find the one that I had typed up, different fonts and stuff like that. So like the journaling I had typed up for a New Year's Eve layout, I did Century Gothic. That's kind of one of my go-tos. I kept it at 11. It worked great. That's not to say that 12 wouldn't work. I might play around and print it out. What's going to happen is the bigger you make your font, the little bit bigger the space between the lines becomes. And if you're only cutting out a couple rows, you're not going to notice it. It's if you're cutting out the full die, you might notice that they line up at the top, but they no longer line up at the bottom. It's because your line spacing has gotten, it's actually not a 1/4 inch. So it just kind of keeps going. So I hope that is probably explained terribly, but I wanted to show how I had done it the first time with Google Docs. Now, the second method that I am using is Google Sheets. So it's the same thing. You go into Google, you come up here to the available apps. Mine is again down here in the second section, and it's in Sheets. I'm gonna try to figure out a way to share this as well. This is already formatted to where these cells are a 1/4 inch tall, and they are also 4 1/4 inch wide, and it's set up where there is one here and one here. It's up here so that you know it came from Google Sheets. I'm going to retitle this. This was just me messing around, and then that it goes with the Hero Arts die. Now, I saved it like this so that if anybody is downloading it and they're going to use it, do not change your row or your column sizes. So you want to be careful that you're not coming over here and like changing this. You don't want to kind of accidentally come over here and pull one of these. If you do, just do an undo or a Control Z, or I wish I knew what it was on an Apple. I'm sorry guys, if you're on Apple, you probably can figure this kind of stuff out. And then I have it set up to, let me see. So when you go to print it, down here, I already have it. It's gonna print landscape. My margins are set to narrow. I went ahead and I took off the grid lines because I didn't want them to print. There's no notes, so that doesn't really matter. So your journaling is gonna print here in this area. These little black corners I'm gonna show in the next clip. I put these in here so anybody that feels like they have trouble lining things up, you're basically gonna put the corner of the die touching the corner of these, and you should be good. Now, the good thing about using Sheets is these are already sized for you. It's just a matter of, in a word processing, you can type, let's see, so you can type your journaling, and it will continue to the next line because of the formatting, but like you can see here, because this is like an Excel based thing, it's going to continue typing. So if you're going to use this method, you want to make sure that you're kind of keeping an eye on where your words end in relation to the actual cell. Now, I had to cut out part of the video because I had a formatting issue. So if you've noticed that the actual words have changed, it's fine. So you're just going to type your journaling, but pay attention to where the line ends. So like continuing on, if I type and, I can already tell that we're past that 4 1/4. So I'm just going to go to the end of my last word. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to continue with my thought. This is already set to align all of your text to the left. So when you run this through the die, the left is going to cut for you. It's the right side that you're just going to go, and if you like the look of your journaling ending right where the last letter is, then you're just going to do like you would normally do with journaling strips and cut off the end. I think going forward, I am probably going to continue to use this version because I sized each of these rows to be a 1/4 inch tall. I know that if I come up here and let's say I've accidentally changed this to an 18-inch font, it is not going to fit. So, and you can tell it's not going to fit because the line is cutting through the letters. This is why I'm kind of leaning towards anybody wanting to use this die and just kind of needing a little bit of hand holding to probably go with the sheet file, because I've already gone through and I've formatted it so that you're not going to run into, maybe you're testing out different fonts and you want to see what's going to fit and what's not going to fit. If you do it in this one, you're going to have a little bit more wiggle room. Now, again, I need to go back and download some of my favorite fonts from the internet because this is a newer computer and I've kind of just barely put anything on it to get myself going in the last couple months. This Pacifico one is already on here, so we're just going to kind of go and test typing and see how the sizing looks. Now, to me, this is a font that I probably just would never use. I'm going to zoom in so that you guys can see a little better. This is one of those things where you got to just pick fonts that you like and you like the way that they are. I wouldn't use this one just because the way that the font itself is formatted, to my eye, it looks like it's closer to the top of the line than it is. It's not like centered in the cell. It is centered in the cell because when you look at where like the Y and the P and the G come down, they're touching. So like if I was going to use this one or something similar, I would probably lower my font size just a little bit, just because to me this looks a little bit more centered. And like I said, this is where you just kind of start playing around. You're going to have your fonts that you love, or maybe you only use one font, and that kind of thing. Like I said, I'm going to go back and download the ones that like I can remember, because the ones you get from like DaFont, they always have unique names. So one of the ones I liked was Throwing Cupcakes in the Air, and there was another one that was like Yummy something. So I'm going to go look for those, download them. I will go ahead and put them on here as well. And then what I'm going to do is continue to update this document, like I said, with the fonts and the sizes. I'm still kind of learning about sharing stuff like this openly with people, so give me a little bit of grace if something doesn't work. There will be a link in the video for my Facebook group. I'm a little easier to get a hold of on there. I don't always get notifications through YouTube. I noticed when I passed like 3,000 subscribers, it was a little harder not only to find things, but I just wasn't getting notifications on stuff, and I would find questions like weeks later, and I don't like that. So a lot of people will either send me a private message through Facebook or Instagram, or we're kind of answering lots of questions on different things in the Facebook group, and I'm just a little bit more accessible there, and I find it a little bit easier to share like documents. Now, of course, the third and probably easiest method to use these is to just do handwritten journaling. Personal preference, just don't enjoy handwriting my journaling. I have a tendency to leave words out. I also tend to, it's like I write too fast for my thoughts, and so when I get done, I'm missing words, things are spelled wrong. It's kind of a nightmare, and I don't particularly like my handwriting, but I know a lot of people prefer this type of method, and that's kind of what like sparked my interest in this die as well, was just kind of knowing that somebody could run this through their die cutting machine a couple times and kind of have a stockpile of journaling strips that are all a 1/4 inch tall. They're all uniform, and you can just kind of go to town and do your journaling and use as many as you need to. And again, because these are 4 1/4 inches wide, you just want to make sure that you're kind of keeping in mind where they're going to end up on your layout. And if you need them to be less wide, then just trim them down. So we've got the 3 methods to kind of use them. And then I am showing here how I printed the document that I made that just kind of has tips and information on it. I'm using that as my test to cut these out. The first thing that I like to do is to cut this in half. Now, I'm not measuring or anything. I'm just eyeballing the distance between the two sections. Basically, I need this to fit through a big shot. Now, because I printed from the Google Sheets, these have those little corners that I talked about earlier. I line them up so that the corner of the die is overlapping the corner of that just a tiny bit. I go through and make sure all four are lined up, and then honestly, I'm just using Scotch tape. Now, normally I would print on cardstock, but for the sake of playing around today, this is just regular printer paper. When using something like Scotch tape or anything that you think might actually tear the paper, you just kind of want to place the tape only on the die and then the paper that's going to be cut away from it, like the negative space. Otherwise, use like masking tape or something that you know isn't going to mess with the journaling strips. Another thing that I have done is I've also like scooted the die up a little bit and used like the lines that won't have text on them to attach my tape. So I was a little sad. This is the second time I've used it and it didn't make the little like wind chime noise. So I don't know if that's consistent or what, but you can see how quick it cut all of those. They're all uniform. And like here, I'm showing where my journaling doesn't go for the full 4 1/4 inch width. That doesn't bother me. I know some people like their journaling strips to be all the same width regardless of the open space. If you're like me and you don't like it, you just cut off the end and they're all going to be a little bit different. So I hope that helps. Definitely leave questions down below in the comment section or head on over to the Facebook group, or you can reach out to me in private message via Facebook or Instagram. Again, anybody that ordered this through an affiliate link or without an affiliate link, if you were just as excited as me, I thank you. If I could hug you, I would. I'm so excited about this myself, and the fact that you guys are as excited as I am makes me so happy, and I can't wait for you guys to share your journaling strips.